Welcome to Rodney Veal's Inspired By, a production of Public Media Connect, the regional partnership of CET in Cincinnati and Think TV in Dayton. Rodney Veal, our host for this podcast, is an independent choreographer, interdisciplinary artist, and all-around fan of all things arts and creativity, and he's excited to share another great conversation with you. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rodney Veal's Inspired By podcast. I'm super excited and delighted because I've actually had time and opportunity before the podcast to hang out with this fabulous photographer, artist, spoken word artist, musician. He's a multi-hyphenate, and I think he's at the very beginning stages of pulling the multi-hyphenates together, and it's just going to be an exciting mix. I think he's one of the most talented photographers I've ever encountered in our midst, and not to make him blush, but I just feel like his portraiture is something that must be seen and experienced for you to understand how well this man captures the souls of his subjects. So, without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Shon Curtis. Welcome, Shon.
Wow, that was the best intro I've probably had ever in my life. So I receive and appreciate that. How are you, Rodney?
I'm doing good. I mean, I just have a little bit of congestion, but that's just typical Ohio weather.
Absolutely.
I'm like, really? Before Thanksgiving?
Good old Ohio weather, right?
Good old
we have all 4 seasons in 1 week.
Yep.
That's how it goes.
Yep. Sometimes in the same day. It's just that's our thing. But yeah, no, I mean, I genuinely mean it. And for the audience, is like, we're working on a documentary on the life and career of Bing Davis, who is an absolute incredible
legend
icon. Like, he defines the word icon. I'm like, no, folks. Yeah, this
Absolutely.
Man is doing it. It is unreal. And we're very lucky to have Shon on board to capture Bing's and Audrey's official portraits for the documentary. And so we filmed behind the scenes. So you're getting a little teaser to the documentary. But it was just like, one of the things that I noticed is, and this is a free-ranging conversation, is that my observation was that when you created and crafted in an environment that all time and place and everything else, there's a lot going on in our world, but in that room, it was about being so present, and being so present for the subject, but also being so present for everyone in the room. Like, it wasn't just the subjects, it was everything.
Right.
It was like, and so you created that environment and that vibe, and then you also, how you filmed your subjects. And I want you to talk people through why you have a conversation and a dialogue as you're filming, because that's really crucial. Talk about that.
Well, I appreciate that. It's interesting being, someone witnessing me witness someone else, right? Like, I think I've often described what I do as witnessing someone, which at times is a very vulnerable thing. It's a very vulnerable moment. So I try to be intentional about creating that space where it's just us in this space, being honest with each other. And I happen to have that camera in my hand and allowing you this space to be truly who you are. And then you giving me the blessing to capture that, right? Like, that's kind of the environment I want to create. It was Gregory Heisler, who's one of my favorite portrait photographers, who says that the only relationship that matters in this moment of creation is the relationship between the sitter and the photographer, and how, in order to get this vulnerability out of a person, I have to give that vulnerability. I have to give you who I am for you to give me who you are and allow me to capture that. So the dialogue is the key for that for me, because I had this long background in sales and customer service and interacting with people. So I kind of brought all of that into this space. So my portrait sessions are a little different, because most of the time I'm talking to you, I'm helping you understand who I am, and then bit by bit, you're giving me more of who you are. So by the end of the session, we have some really amazing photos because you weren't afraid by the time we were done, right? Everybody's so apprehensive as we start that I just need you to truly just let go and just be here with me, and however long you got me for, so I can get something real from you.
I love how you say that, like, the being vulnerable. I think there's a lot of folks who, when they think about their portrait being taken, they think it like glamour shot, Olin Mills, like
Mm,
I'm stiff and studied. No, there's no stiffness.
right.
There's no rigidity to your portraits. There's a vibrancy. There's an energy that comes off of it. I mean,
Mm,
that's what I find so fascinating, because I go, well, wait a minute, like, you talked about it just a bit, like
mhm.
sales. I mean, I think for a lot of our viewers and listeners, we all come to the arts having done other things that
Right.
inform our art making process. It's not necessarily happening in a classroom. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily about the technique. It's like who we are as human beings. So talk to me about this whole notion that you like customer service actually leads to being a master at taking portraits. I mean,
That's funny.
that's
That's real. Like I think that's really what it is, right? Like it's our experience kind of leads our approach, right? So like it kind of makes us understand how to approach whatever the medium is we choose to do as an artist. So my experience is 15 years in sales, 6 years in teaching, but also like having gone through these phases of being, artists of various mediums, right? The customer service experience, I've had a very diverse experience with how to give customer service because I've had every sales job imaginable, from commission to non-commission to specific industries to door to door to over the phone. Like I've had so many different sales. Only thing I haven't sold was cars, right?
wow.
Literally, the only thing I haven't sold. Going door to
Okay.
door, you have no idea what you're anticipating when you knock on someone's door and then try to make an offering. Right now, I've been greeted with a gun. I've been greeted with dogs. Uh,
Yikes. Oh my
I've been greeted with
goodness.
just flat out racism in the middle of what felt like Kentucky. It was ridiculous. Like I'm talking about Klan flags and everything, and I still knocked on that door, right? Because I still had to make the sale. But it helps me understand that human experience and get that diverse range of emotions that I can kind of be calm and steady in a lot of situations. And I think that helps reassure the person I'm photographing too. Is like if I'm calm and I'm ready and I'm prepared for you, it kind of lets you ease off the gas of anxiety because you feel comforted. You feel like, okay, I can really just trust this person, which is kind of the thing, right? It's all trust. So I think that being in these really adverse situations in my life have allowed me to calm my nerves in the most intense moments so that you feel like, okay, I'm in good hands. I'm good. I'm covered, right? And that just lets you let go.
And that's something for someone who's, I say personally, no matter who you're going to get your portrait taken,
Hmm.
or if you want this documentation of who you are, listen up, because that's important, because it's
Hmm.
it's not it's not perfunctory. This serves something bigger than the printed image. This is
Yeah.
it speaks to a larger thing, and I just feel like take care with that. Take care about
Yeah.
how you represent yourself, but also too how you represent yourself in an authentic way. And it's
Absolutely.
and it's and I just love the fact that you used like the life to inform what happens to you when you press the shutter release. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just, and I got to witness it. So I was there for hours, and I was like, yes,
Yeah. I mean,
yes,
that's all it is for me. Like I'm
yeah,
not much of a technical photographer, right? I mean, I can get technical, right? But like I'm self-taught. So a lot of the
really.
time, oh yeah, yeah, oh YouTube University, Skillshare, was it Udemy? I don't even know if I said that right, but like those, online self-purchase classes and talking to other photographers and building up a network, that's what really taught me. I tried to go to now I did say I tried to go to school for photography probably a year into my career technically because I had lost my job. I had lost my teaching job, and because it was a levy paying job, and the levy didn't pass, so I lost that job and kind of was trying to figure out what am I going to do next. And I already had a camera and some things because I had this magazine I wanted to start. So what I did was I took my deferred comp and I took all my investment money that I had at the time that I could afford to put into something, and I just like upgraded my gear and said, okay, let me like take photography actually serious. And then in there, I thought, okay, maybe I need a bigger network because I'm not really landing the gigs that I want to land. So I was like, oh, let me go to school. So I signed up for the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I got accepted, and I was probably in that program for about 7 months, made the dean's list, had great grades. I wasn't challenged because I was already a photographer for a year going into the program.
Hmm.
So even at the very beginning of the program, I was already ahead by a year, technically. And my advisor, who knew nothing about Ohio except for LeBron James, would call me and ask me questions about LeBron James because he didn't have anything to advise me on. He was like, oh, your grades are great. I really don't have nothing to say, but how about Cleveland? How about Miami? Like these things, right?
Right.
And just super trivial conversation. And we would talk for 10 minutes and then he'd get off the phone and go on to the next student. Until one day he called me and he sounded a little bit more serious. He was like, Shon, I feel like we're doing you a disservice. I feel like we have you in this program. You're already ahead of the program. There's never going to be a moment where you're like at pace with what we're doing because you're already an experienced photographer. You're already in the field and you've learned so much already beforehand that I feel like you're wasting your money. So I have two options for you. I can withdraw you and we can start the process of returning your student loans or returning some of your student loans back, or I can put you in a different major. And I chose, of course, the first one because student loans are no joke. So he helped me process that. I withdrew from the program. That was literally 7 years ago. I've been a photographer ever since. But I did try to go to school for it, and maybe I went too late. I don't know.
No, well, I don't think it's too late. I think it's just, I think we're all having these conversations, and I'm an educator, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
in higher ed as well. It's it's the recognition that it's not cookie cutter. The
Exactly.
students are not all the same.
Yeah.
Students come in with, like, maybe they've had came in with previous experience and skills
Mm-hmm.
and a proven talent. I mean, and that goes to creativity. That speaks to the well of creativity that you have what's inside yourself. And so I think a lot of times we think if we don't complete a higher ed process, we think it's a failure. And it's like,
Right.
no, 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 no. Sometimes you go to figure out that's not right for me, but
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
pathway is right for me. But I wish we built it within our K through 12. I mean, that's a soapbox conversation, that we build it into into what we teach students. It's not teaching, it's about let us explore so that you can come up with the best option that's for you, and
Right.
not necessarily a great option for improving graduation rates or completion rates. It's about you.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we start thinking about the individual within that process, it just makes it easier. So that
Exactly.
that was
I'm
my
with you.
soapbox. Shon, we have these conversations. I just go straight there.
That was a good place to be.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
I think that's something that people need to understand and aware about: expertise and mastery. It's not necessarily degreed or credentialed. It's
Right.
about experience. It's about talent. It's about the individual making the decision to do this thing. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
when you said you picked up photography, I go back because I did the multi hyphenate. You were studying. I was slightly aware of you being a student at Stivers in music, and
Yes.
so because I taught at Stivers School for the Arts in Dayton, Ohio. Talk about music. I mean, you said this. You said this on Friday. You said I was gunning to be the next Coltrane. I was,
Yo,
yeah.
100%. Like
Talk
you
about that.
you
I mean,
couldn't tell me that I wasn't, right? Like really briefly into the background behind music for me. My mother, when I had to stay with my aunts for a little while, and my mother got me this cassette player. And in this cassette player, there was one tape. On side A was Sonny Rollins and his greatest hits. And on side B was John Coltrane and his greatest hits. I had never heard jazz before that, right? And I was probably 8, 9, something like that. I could be getting that completely wrong at the age, but like that doesn't
That's
matter.
all right. Yeah.
I was fixated on this sound. Now, both of them were the tenor saxophone primarily, right? Like they played the tenor primarily, and I didn't know what the tenor was. All I knew is that whatever this sound they were creating was, and how vastly different each player was, I wanted to be in the middle of that. I was like, I don't know what I had. And I had no band experience, no nothing. I don't know what I had to do to get to that place to play music. All I know, and I didn't even know the instrument. So I was like, I just need to do this. So fast forward a little bit, I'm in school. There's this girl I like. It always starts with a girl. There's this girl I like. It's the same reason I started wearing glasses too, and now I need them, which is another story. There's this girl I like. She's in band. She plays the alto saxophone. I don't have any classes with her. I'm like, I need to figure out how to put us in the same class. I'm a kid, but I'm still strategizing how to do this. So I find out our band teacher's name is Mr. Clausen. So I go and ask for a hall pass. I say I'm going to the bathroom. I don't go to the bathroom. I go to Mr. Clausen's class. Somehow I caught him in a period where he didn't have anybody, didn't have a class or anything. And I'm talking to him. And I'm like, hey, listen, I really want to join band. I don't tell him my reason. He's like, well, let me see your hands. So he looks at my hands. He sees how big they are. He's like, what do you think about a saxophone? And I said, yes, that's perfect, because I knew the girl played the saxophone. I didn't know what saxophone. I just knew she played the saxophone. It was a small saxophone. So I was like, yeah, that one. I'll do that. So he gave me a tenor, and he gave me a mouthpiece, gave me a whole setup to try to just figure out if I had the wind power to do it. I did. And somehow, slowly but surely, it clearly became less about the girl and more about this instrument, because I had figured out, after telling him finally about this cassette tape and how I was like in love with this sound, he was like, oh, that's a tenor. You playing that? And I said, this is the instrument that makes that sound? He was like, yeah. I was like, so help me make that sound. I'm a kid. I'm just making demands, right? Like, it's not even about anything else. I'm like, I just want to sound like them. So I'm playing this instrument, and I'm playing it for a few years. And then he's like, I want to get you into this school for the arts. And I'm like, I don't know if we can do that, because I was a little hood kid. I wasn't really thinking about that, but my mother was really thinking about that, because I had this teacher who told her, this child is an artist. Make sure you invest in his art, and she meant that. And my mother carried that in the back of her mind, and I had no idea that this exchange even happened between them. So when she heard he wanted me to audition for this art school, she was like, I'm 100% for it. Whatever we got to do to get him in there, let's get him in there. So they did. So I auditioned. He taught me this jazz piece. He taught me how to read music. He taught me how to improv a little bit. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. So, sixth grade year, I go audition for Stivers. I get in. I get into their jazz ensemble, which is like their biggest thing they have there. That's a whole other thing. But
Oh,
I got in.
I know, because
I got in.
I was there.
Right? So you
I
already
was
know.
there. I know.
You already know. So I got in, and that is when I started being a jazz musician. Like, that was legitimately it. I was doing the John Coltrane shift. It was 12 hours of rehearsal a day if I can get it in. There was playing at the club on weekends. There was playing at Jazz Central. They had an open band on Sunday nights, and they was letting kids come in and play from high school. So I was one of them kids. I would go in and play. I would cut up.
Oh.
And it was just an amazing experience. I'm never going to not love jazz, and music is always going to be a huge part of me and my legacy and my story, because it really helps me understand what it is to be in between the lines and understand nuance, because that's what improv is this nuance, right, to life, except it's a sound, right? But like, it really just helped me understand that in life, you're going to have measures, you're going to have lines, but the best part of life is going to be what's in between.
Oh,
right. So
oh yes,
that kind of just did something for me as an artist. Like, and that brought me to poetry, right? Like, there was a moment where I was playing music for so long, and I was on stage so much, but with an ensemble, that eventually I wanted to see what it was like being on stage by myself, and figuring out what that light looks like.
Which is your own voice. which is
Exactly,
like
with my own voice.
with your own voice. And it's so funny because Sean, when you said that, like between the lines, there's a
Hmm.
thing that Sierra Leone, who is
Good
she's a
friend of mine.
great artist, human
Hmm.
being. She and I both talk about people aren't comfortable with the gray.
Yeah.
They love the linearity, the duality of black and white, but you gotta be comfortable with the gray.
Oh
That
yeah.
area that does not quite, we don't know what it is, but you got to be in that place. And I think that's true of all creatives. I think it's
Hmm.
really true of people of color that we reside in that gray,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. Because
that's what the special sauce is,
the
reside
gray
in the
is how
gray.
we saved. We kept our, we kept safe. We were alive, right? Like I think we truly live in that gray areas. Because if we were to go by the rules, we wouldn't be here. You know, like the rule was we're not supposed to be human beings. We're not supposed to want to fight for our lives. We're not supposed to just exact our own agency over ourselves. We're not supposed to do these things, right? Those are against the rules. And the rules are in the black and white areas. We had to live in the gray just to exist. I'm with you.
Yeah, no, that's real. So this journey to spoken word.
Hmm.
Language. You do have a command of language. It's
Oh,
just,
thank you.
no.
For real.
It's real. It's real. It's real. I say that with, you know, I'm not saying it to blow smoke. So what, that whole, so you're saying that you what does it feel like to do it? Why was it spoken word? Why wasn't it just playing the tenor
Mm.
sax solo?
Well,
I'm out
so
of curiosity about that.
my intro to creativity and artistry was spoken word. That conversation my mother had with my teacher at the time was when I was like 6 years old, because in whatever grade that is, I was asked for an assignment to write a poem. And I wrote a poem about the passing of my grandfather, who was like the most influential person in my life at that time. And it brought my teacher to tears, and it brought my class to tears. And she was just enamored with the fact that this 6 year old truly brought her to tears with, you know, this language. And that's when she told my mother, like, this kid is an artist to his bones. You better make sure you're paying attention to that. You better make sure you're investing in that, because this kid is gonna do something someday, and you're gonna understand this kid is an artist. And my mother and my father aren't, they never identified themselves as artists or creatives in much capacity. So for my mother, it was like, this is just this gift that was bestowed upon him. So it's unfair of me to try to keep that from him. So let me invest. So, fast forward, I'm kind of burnt out on the ensemble thing and doing performances every so often. In my senior year of high school, I ended up getting on the literary magazine team or group or class or whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Cyrus was interesting. Things Classes turned quickly into actual organizations and projects, and
And
it
doing
was it was
stuff,
a thing.
just doing things.
Yeah.
Truly, like manifesting content.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
was a big deal at that school.
It was. It
Even for
was.
even for dance. It was like, okay, these kids are choreographing, filming, they're going out and
Exactly.
performing on their own schedule. So
That's
so
what it was. You're right. It manifests into its own entity to a degree, right? Because they truly just bring you the concept of being a full spectrum artist, where it's like, okay, not only are you going to be taking these classes, not only are you going to be doing rehearsals, you're going to be making your own shows, you're going to be producing, you're going to be writing, you're going to be doing these things. So I joined the literary magazine club, group, team, class, whatever you want to call it. And I believe I left a notebook there in the classroom of poetry that I just wrote. Right, I was always writing because that was kind of like my thing to kind of, as an only child, I needed to purge a lot of emotion all the time. And I didn't have anybody that I felt like I could confide in, so I would just write about it. So my teacher had found this notebook full of poetry, and I was panicking, right? I didn't know where I left it. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. So the next day at school, I come back in, I go to that class at some point, and she's like, Miss Houston, can I talk to you after class? I'm like, okay, cool. I think I'm in trouble. I think it's
Oh,
over. It's over. I don't know what I did.
oh.
So she had the notebook in her hand when I came in and talked to her, and she was like, "How long have you been writing?" And I'm like, I've been writing since I was like 6 or so, but like I just write for me, right? I don't write for anybody else. I don't perform poetry. So she was like, I want to hear you perform this. I want to hear you read this, but like read it in your voice. And that was something she really taught me in that moment. Is that there's a such thing as a poet voice, right? And it's real
Hmm.
melodic. It's real, tempo based, and it's really expressive. But sometimes it's also super performative, right? She was like, I want to hear you read this poem because she was like, I like to hear poetry when it's read by the person who wrote it. Because you know where the breaths are, what you were thinking at the time, what emotion you're connected to. So it's better for me to hear you read it so I can get a full understanding of it. I didn't know she was setting me up for the okie doke. I just thought she wanted me to
Ah!
read this poem.
Oh, she was said you have to find out if you were going to be a performer.
100%. And I read it, and it brought her. It did something to her. Next thing I know, she's like, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do." So they literally came up with a game plan for me. My senior year, I was already doing music as a magnet, from 7th grade to senior year. So here's senior year. I'm like, okay, I'm almost done. She's like, no, 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 no. Here's what we're gonna do. I want you to host this loudspeaker poetry show downtown in the Oregon District. I want to do a showcase. I want you to do poetry. I don't want you to do music. And then she's like, I want you to close the show, as a matter of fact. So I was like, okay, all right, I'm agreed to it. I'm gonna say yes. We're gonna get out here. We're gonna figure it out. So I started performing in the city. That's all right. Water does that to me.
I know.
It does the same thing to me.
How that?
So I started performing in the city. I started doing open mics. I had a great showcase my senior year, and I did a poem that really closed out the show. It was really dope. My mom was super proud because she hadn't seen me do poetry in a long time. And I started committing myself to being a writer my senior year. And I remember one of my teachers, Mr. Unger, who's one of the most incredible human beings on the
Oh, he
planet.
really is. And folks, I mean,
I'm gonna
as
say,
an
oh,
he's pretty amazing. He's an
he
amazing guy.
truly is. He truly is. He affects every generation that comes to his classes, which I think is such a telling thing. Is that there's not a generation that doesn't say that about him.
Right.
So senior year, I probably have maybe 8, 9 performances all over the city, the whole senior year. Mr. Unger was at every one of them,
Wow.
and I didn't even tell him about one. He showed up to every single performance I ever did my senior year, and he would always sit right next to my mother in the back somewhere. If I didn't see him, my mother would just tell me he was there, and I had no idea he would be present, right? But that's just how amazing he is. Now, what it did for me was it made me truly love spoken word. I was already studying, Langston Hughes and James Baldwin and people like that. Paul Laurence Dunbar too, of course, because I'm here in Dayton. But Langston Hughes was kind of my guy at the time. I don't know
Okay.
why. I just identified with his process and writing a little bit more. So I ended up becoming a host of Dayton Poetry Slam, and then being connected to all the poetry shows kind of in our region, like from Kentucky to Cincinnati to Columbus to everywhere.
Wow.
So I became like a conduit, which is how I kind of met Sierra Leone, is because she would always need poets for shows, and she knew I was the person to call because I would just hook her up with everybody, right? Because I was
Right.
the connect.
Yeah.
It was very funny. I felt like a pusher, and I was pushing poets.
You're pushing poetry.
I was pushing poets.
I love it. I love it.
So I was like, how many you need? Oh, you need 2 poets? Okay, bet I got you. And I'll make a call, and then here go these poets will pop up at the show. So, but it was fun. It was a dope, fun experience at the time, and I really loved it. I really loved something about writing, and not necessarily mastering language, but more so redefining it. Right, like I would redefine what a metaphor was for me, and come up with these really abstract ideas, which is, the contribution to my artistry in terms of being able to tell a story, right? Being able to understand that
Right.
there's
Right.
a beginning, middle, and end. in between is where the improv comes from jazz. So I was starting to get a full spectrum of how to be an artist, or how my process is as an artist, as a storyteller. Um, Fast forward a little bit more, I got burnt out of that. That was the thing. I got burnt out with certain things. So I got burnt out with performing all the time on stage doing poetry. And I mean, I was writing every day. I was writing 2-3 poems a day, just as practice,
Wow.
repetition. So I got burnt out on doing that. So I started a magazine because I still wanted to do poetry, but I just didn't want to perform anymore.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
started a magazine. I needed a photographer. Thus, the full spectrum of how I became a photographer comes in. Writing led me to needing a photographer, and I became the photographer I needed.
A communications specialist for Think TV and the producer of this podcast. Thank you for listening to Rodney Veal's Inspired By. This podcast is a production of CET and Think TV, two local PBS stations. As PBS stations, the work we do online, on air, and in the community is supported by listeners like you. If you're enjoying the show and would like to support our work, please consider becoming a member at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. Plus, when you sign up to donate at least $5 a month, you'll get access to special members-only streaming videos on the PBS app through Passport. Learn more at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
Everything you're saying, we've had producers for musical theater. We've had our visual artists. We've had a comedian who they all talk about, like, you know what, necessity, writing, being like, okay, you just got to get in, and you realize, well, I need to do these things. I need to approach it this way, in order to get it done. And I just find that very fascinating, because podcast is called Inspired By. It's about inspiration. It's about, like, what inspires people to do what they do. And I'm finding, like, I can see it. I can now go, oh, that makes so much sense. And having watched your photography process, this all kind of, it all makes sense. I mean, it's like, oh, like we solved the Matrix. So, I mean, so when you knew that necessity, so what kind of photography were you looking for your magazine that forced you to kind of pick up the camera?
Well, I didn't really know what I needed, right? Like I knew that, there were some interesting people I was meeting in the city. They were doing some interesting things, and I just wanted to document them, right? I wanted there to be a visual documentation, because I've always had an eye for aesthetic, right? Because even at Stivers, of course, you do all these mediums of art. Like I was doing painting and sculpting and all these other things. So I've always had this visual aesthetic to go along with, this application of being a jazz musician, this application of writing. So it was like, okay, I don't really have an outlet in terms of continuing this visual aesthetic that I have, this visual eye. So I would go to these things, and I would write, and I was writing and editing for my own magazine. And I just realized this would be really great if I had something visual to show with this article that I just wrote, or this article that one of my writers just wrote. So I started bringing in this guy named Aaron Pascal, whose signature is AP2 photography. And he was like, and after hearing my story a little bit, he was like, didn't you go, like, if you went to art school and you have this aesthetic, why don't you just pick up a camera? And
Huh,
so,
that's interesting.
yeah, so I bought a camera. Matter of fact, my coworker bought me my first camera, because she believed in me wholeheartedly. So she bought me my first camera. And I started using that camera everywhere and just taking pictures of everything. But something about, like, the one-on-one portraiture kind of spoke to me louder than anything else, right? Because I think shooting events and things like that, there's just a bunch of noise, right? There's a bunch
Right.
happening.
It's just like,
And
yes,
and it's
yeah.
about the pulse. It's about having a pulse and understanding the flow of the event, understanding what that feeling is, that inclination, that, okay, I need to be capturing this at this moment. There's a pulse that you have to have. And I found that out, being an activist and going into marches and things like that. And then understanding when things would escalate by the pulse of the crowd around you, to know, okay, now we got to run, right? Like, it was the same mentality I brought to photography. Was there's a pulse here, that I need to make sure I always have my hand on, because I need to know what is important to photograph and what's not. But
Mm.
something about that exchange between me and the other person in front of my lens, that was something that was like, okay, this feels more like something I need to do. This feels familiar, right? This
Huh.
feels familiar. This was the writer and the page. This was the breath and the saxophone. Something about this one person in front of me and making this relationship manifest on this camera is more familiar to me than anything else I've done. So that's how I
Wow.
got to portraiture eventually.
I love that, because it's not necessarily, and this is what's interesting, because I think people always think it's like, boom, it's automatic. It's like you're going to, this thing that you kind of choose. Like I'm a choreographer. But I know that I'm a choreographer because I started off as a visual artist,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw dancers moving through space just like paint on a canvas. It's like you're making relationships, you're creating patterns, and I understood that intellectually, and I think that's really important, and I think that I love how you said the pulse, because I think that's what your photographs do. They capture. There's an energy. I
Mm-hmm.
said you've taken my portrait twice, and each time it's been like, that is these are the only photographs that actually look like me
Mm.
right now. Like it is real. Like, and people go, that's right. That's exact. It's not, and it's a beautifully, it's beautifully curated photograph. It's just there's an energy that you
Yeah.
capture me. I talk with my hands, and it was like, that's, I'm never gonna let that go. I refuse to be defined by, oh, put your hands down. Like, no,
No.
yeah,
Bring
be
them up.
you. Yeah, bring them
Yeah.
up. Be you.
Talladega Nights, right? Like, I love, like, that scene is going to be iconic to me as a photographer from now on. Whenever when he got in front of that camera and he didn't know what to do with his hands, so he just brought him by his face so awkwardly. I accept that and I appreciate that, right?
Right.
Because
I
people
love
do
that.
express themselves that way. Why not bring your hands into your face, into this camera? It's not a
Yeah.
mistake. I'm not going to correct you. Do it.
Do it. Be you.
Yeah.
Which is so funny, because as I think this, like I said, I think a lot of people, it's a question about nature and artifice, and there's, I think people respond to the carefully composed facade like
Hmm.
photographs, and those are lovely, technically, but
Sure. Yeah.
they're kind of soulless.
Hmm.
Like, where's the soul? Like, where's the, you bring the soul,
Yeah.
you bring out the soul in the subject, you bring out the soul in, and so it there's a vibrancy and a spark of electricity to your images, and
Mm.
yeah, I fanboy out, so that's
I
just who I
appreciate
am.
that, man. No, see, I
Uh,
receive and accept that. I'm
yeah,
just
so
glad that someone sees it, right? Like, I don't know what I set out to do, intentionally with photography, other than just capture what's honest, right?
mhm.
And I think that there's so much diversity in life that my images are always going to look different. But if someone can see my images and connect that tether to each one and be like, this is one of his images, this is one of Sean's images, I think that's like the most amazing compliment to me, you know?
Okay, yeah, and so, because I think a lot of people don't realize is, like, you, because knowing you and still getting to know you. You're based in Dayton, and you're working
Yes.
out of University of Dayton's hub,
Hmm.
well, as artists in residence. I mean, talk about the fact that why. I mean, I mean, hearing your words about why it's important for this community to kind of support artists at this stage of their
Mm,
careers, and why it's important, especially artists of color.
yeah.
I mean, those two, just two-parter. I'm always about a two-parter. So talk about that. Why this is important, why it matters. I mean,
I That's a great question. I think that it's important. I think it's vital to supporting artists, especially early on, because a lot of times we'll create, if you really are creating art and you really are creating, for the sake of creating, for the sake of purging, whatever your reason is that self-identifies as an artist, you don't even care to share it. right? Like it's not like I'm creating to share the work. I'm creating because I'm compelled to. I need to, right? It's part of my life that I need to be creating something. So a lot of times, if we're not getting that support and we're not experiencing people that also believe in us, we'll keep it to ourselves, right? Because until you recognize, like for me, right, my artistry is such a testament to my faith, to my
Wow.
understanding of what faith is for me, that my artistry is my testimony, right? Like it is my offering, it is my gift that has been gifted to me, so then I have to gift it to the world because it actually doesn't belong to me, right? So like that's the reason I share my work, and that's why I, you know, if you if you can't afford a session with me, I'll find a way to photograph you anyway, because I have to give this to you, right? Like your image matters, and your documentation of yourself matters in this moment, right? Even if you're the only other person that sees it, and I'm the only other person that sees it, we still need to take it. We still need to
Hmm.
photograph it. Um, because again, it's my testimony. It's my testament to be human and to offer to the world something that was given to me. Right? I think that I was always meant to be an artist because I've always just coexisted with art in my life. And it's been placed there not by me, not by my mother, not by anybody else, right? It's this gift.
Hmm.
So let me give it, right? It's selfish of me to not give it. So until you reach that place as an artist, until you reach that place of fully believing, you're gonna be apprehensive about sharing your work to the world.
Hmm.
So the more people that believe in your work, the more people that tell you, hey, this touched me, this meant something to me, uh, unless they're giving you that, you're not going to share it. Why would you share it? It's for you. You created it. It's something that you tried to expel from yourself. That's vulnerable. Why would I intentionally sign up to be vulnerable? Right? Who does that? Well, I do that. Right? Like that's my thing. That
But
is literally my thing. Is I sign up to be vulnerable.
and I think that's every artist. I think it's everybody
Yeah.
who does something that's in a creative realm, and it's like you don't show up to be guarded. You show up to be
Mm-hmm.
open.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so when you're that's such a I love that it's a gift, and it's like it's a gift that has to be shared. It's meant to
Yeah.
be shared. It's supposed to be shared. I also often because I always think about um, the people that inspire me, like you inspire me to because it's just because it was like a discovery. It was like
Mhm.
I turned the corner and there you were. You know what I'm saying? And so let's talk about the fact that how we met because I think that
Yeah.
this is really funny. We met through Launch Dayton, which is basically an entrepreneurial's week in Dayton, Ohio. And Audrey Ingram pulled together a panel of folks. We talked about it. She says Shon would be fantastic. Shon Curtis would be great for this panel. It was Ben Baum, Countess Winfrey, and Thomas Troutman. And I just remember the fact that we were in the room and to get us all in the room. I looked at the audience and that audience was like were going to church, and it
Yeah.
was but we all spoke about artistry and creativity in the same sort of. We all looked at each other like, "Oh, we're like apostles here.
Oh
What's
yeah,
going
we're
on?"
we're
What?
locked in. We're locked in. And it's funny, like we were sitting out in that hallway, right? And
Right?
that was the first time all of us had met in the same space.
Really, truly had met. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and there was so much energy in that circle that people gathered outside of that circle watching us, be with each other before even realizing that we all had to step into this room and give a panel, right?
Yeah.
That spoke, so that said something, right? Because we brought that energy into the room, but it's the
Hmm.
fact that that energy permeated out of us before we even got there, you know. So
Yeah.
like launch date, and that was such a great moment for me because I've spoken on a few panels before. I think that what we were able to do, we were able to be really honest about this about being a artist and creative and a lifelong creative, because being an artist is a romanticized thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it can be a romanticized thing, right? The idea of being the starving artist or being this, jilted, misguided, person who's like so creative that their mind just we can't begin to explore it type. Like, yeah, no, there are these ideas of what artistry and creativity are, but we were able to put a real face to it, put real words to it, and give it life, and give it life for these people that wanted to sit in our panel, who have the ambition of being an artist. Like, yeah, okay, you can be an artist, but let me be real with you about what this is, what this actually looks like, right? Like, to understand there's a business to this too, that you also have to begin to understand and
Mm-hmm.
craft, because if you're just caught in the artistry, you can get taken advantage of, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of moments in that panel that I feel like we actually were able to let people walk away with something that they're gonna carry with them forever.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
know?
I totally agree about that because I feel like, and that was the thing is the fact that we were talking from the different vantage points because we weren't all in the same art forms,
Mm-hmm.
but we understood the through line of that notion of there are moments where you can say no.
Yeah.
That was a powerful thing we took. That was like really, it's like, no, thank you for thinking of me, but this doesn't fit with what my vision of going
Exactly.
forward is.
Yes.
And so I think that was really important, but I also think it's important for our audience to understand that we are not trained creatures on a leash that just perform at
Yeah.
demand.
Right.
Because there's a phrase that you use being, performative. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and there's a performative aspect to this kind of relationship to society and culture with artists. It's like,
Yeah.
I
Like,
don't know
I'm
if
not
it's.
here to perform. I've spent years performing, and that was like authentic performing. I'm not performing for the benefit of someone else. Like, and that's the thing. Like, there's so many times when we're asked to perform for
Mhm.
people, and I'm like, this doesn't serve me. This doesn't do me any good, right? It's not serving my creativity. It's not serving my soul. Why am I doing this?
Mhm.
You know, it's hard. It's easy to get caught up in it though,
Oh no,
especially
it
when they
is.
start throwing numbers at you, and they like, would you do this for this much? And it's like, I mean, my rent's due. I don't know, right?
Uh,
You have to fight that urge. You
right,
can't perform. Like, you can't just be performative,
right.
because then
I
this stuff
love
stops becoming real.
it stops becoming real, and I love that because in our conversations we have lots of conversations that uh, we talked about the phrase being ready. There's a difference between
Mm-hmm.
ready and
And
Dayton
dating
ready.
ready. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know, w- Dayton ready allow allows us to not be as brilliant as we could be.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're ready, that allows us to fully be brilliant and share and take in the energies of the universe. And those are
Yes.
two different things. So that's for our audience to ponder more so than anything else to respond to. So, Shon, in our last few minutes, I want you to
Yeah.
talk about if somebody's wanting to be creative, and this is specifically to because right now you're in the photography mode.
Mhm.
What should they be taking into consideration? What would be your advice to
Mm.
them? Because your vantage point now, you're at an early stage. What should they be really considering before they take that step forward?
That's a great question. Like, because it's right. It's not meant for everybody, right? Being an artist isn't meant for everybody. I think everybody's creative, but not everybody's an artist, right? I think it's definitely a privilege to be an artist. I think it's an amazing thing that I get to experience in my life. It's also this heartbreaking thing, right? Like, it is this constant ability to heal enough to continue creating, because you recognize that higher purpose in it. So it's like, okay, I can, what is it through all things, through Christ who strengthens me, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is this interesting space that I find myself in where I can have a moment where my heart is broken, but I can't live there too long. Like, it never makes me want to give up on this, right? Like, there's this understanding that I am doing this because I need to do it. I have to do it, right? There's this will that is compelled to want to do this and continue creating. So I can't live in that heartbreak. I have to mend, I have to heal, and I have to create based on that. You know, I know people be like, oh, have a nest egg, do this, have a backup plan. I understand the realities of life. Trust me, my rent is due. My cell phone bill is not cheap. You know what I'm saying? I
Mhm.
like shoes. There are things that clearly impact my life monetarily that say, okay, this would have been a lot easier if I had this or that set up before I fully went gung ho.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Do it.
But
Say
before
it.
I went gung ho to being a photographer, if I had my nest egg and I was safe and secure, then the idea of being a photographer, is not too far fetched. Or if I had a backup job, if I was doing a little bartending here, if I was doing that, and that's fine. You can have other jobs and still be an artist and create in the midnight hour, right? Like that. The what is it? The 9 to 5 and then the 5 to whenever, right? You
Right.
can be an artist in that part of your life right there.
Right.
It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. I needed to fully believe in this. I needed to fully jump into this. And some days it's great. Some days it's not. Some days I'm eating ramen and that's all right. Right?
There.
That's college student diet. I was eating ramen for a couple of days and but it's okay. It's fine. But for real, I would also say is recognize that you're always going to be a student. There's no mastery to this. I don't believe. Maybe later in my life I'll think differently. But right now, today, I don't believe there's a mastery to this. I believe there's a constant student. I believe that I am constantly engaged with learning to be a better version of me, a better creative, a better artist. That means being open to inspiration, finding my inspiration everywhere, whether it's in life, whether it's in other photography, whether it's in movies, books, art, whatever. I think that you have to be open. You have to receive the world in order to gain a vision of it, in order to create from it. Right? So, like, I'm always going to be learning. I'm always going to be trying to find another technique. I like my lighting now, but I always wanted to evolve. Right? Because I think that there has to be an evolution in art. You have to be constantly evolving or grasping at what is there in front of you. Like, matter of fact, Matthew McConaughey, I feel like it was the Grammys or the Oscars. I think it was the Oscars. He had a great speech where he talked about who his hero is. He said, if somebody asked him who his hero is, and he said, it's me 10 years from now. And he said, I ran into the same guy 10 years later. He asked me, okay, it's 10 years. Now who's your hero? And he's like, it's me 10 years from now. And he says, it's me evolving every time. That's my hero. That's who I'm chasing after. That's the goal. Is to be a better version of me than I was 10 years ago. Same thing as an artist for me. I want to be better tomorrow. I want every shoot, every photograph I take to be better the next time I take it. So I never have a favorite piece. I haven't created my favorite piece,
Man. And with that, Shon, I'm telling you, this is why, folks, you need to be open and receptive and find and track down Shon. His information will be in and all the notes. I'm telling you, it's a life affirming experience to have your portrait taken by Shon. So
thank you,
Shon. I love our time. There's going to be even more time. There's more stuff coming, brother.
Absolutely.
You know how that goes. It's all
We're just getting started.
We are just getting started, and so are you. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Seriously, this is amazing.
Is a production of Public Media Connect, the regional partnership of CET in Cincinnati and Think TV in Dayton. There's a lot of great art happening around Southwest Ohio, and we're excited to be part of it. If you liked this episode, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can learn more and find the show notes at thinktv.org/inspired by or cetconnect.org/inspired by. Thank you.